Okay, so I'm gonna get started. Firstly, as I like to do for all of my teaching, I'd like to learn for the safety of our soldiers and for the return of the Khatufim, the hostages. And tonight, well, for me, it's tonight. For it's even later in Israel, but it's earlier for most of you in the States. We're going to be exploring a little bit of the thought of Cynthia Ozick, but we're going to concentrate on two of her stories. I haven't taught her for a very long time, and I've really enjoyed preparing for this lecture this year and rereading the two stories that I'm going to be focusing on. The first is the shawl, Shawl, as in a scarf, which is a short story about the Holocaust. And the second is called The Pagan Rabbi, which is a longer story. And both are remarkable for very different reasons. But what we have in Ozick's writing, as we'll see, some of the sources that I bring for you, is a commentary on modern Jewish life in many ways. The Shawl less so because it's very much about the Holocaust. It's set in a particular time and place, but it's a commentary on the challenges of being Jewish in the modern world in some ways. Um, she's got some fascinating and scathing things to say. We'll see about being a Jewish writer or a woman writer, and she's probably best known as a feminist thinker. And we'll cover all of that. Somebody very kindly sent me an email last week um, and questioned my assumption that including Cynthia Ozick in this course, because she's a non-Orthodox thinker or writer, and it was pointed out to me that she belongs to an Orthodox synagogue in New Rochelle. Now, just because she belongs to an Orthodox synagogue doesn't mean she's Orthodox. She could be doing it for any number of reasons. She may be more sympathetic towards Orthodoxy than other streams of Judaism. She may want an Orthodox burial. It could be any number of reasons. So my wife's uncle lived in New Rochelle, and I asked him if he knew anything, and he hasn't responded to me. So I don't know. So I did some research this week and I found a PhD. I do love the internet, by the way, right? The internet is one of the coolest things to exist until it, becomes a conscious being and takes over the universe. Then that would be slightly worrying. But before the robots take over, it's quite useful. And I found a PhD called "Finding Her Own Voice: Cynthia Ozick's Female Protagonists and Orthodox Jewish Law." Now, I have to confess, I haven't read the whole PhD, but it does look fascinating. I will get round to it at some point. But it sort of talks about her connection to Orthodoxy, but doesn't make it entirely clear whether she is an Orthodox, practicing Orthodox Jew. Uh, so I'm going to leave that open. I've included her in this course. I'll include her in the course in the future because I think it's really nice to include somebody of her stature in the literary world. It's nice to have women voices, for sure. And what she talks about and her use of short stories, novels, it's really fascinating. I have, I think, two or three collections. I haven't brought you a full bibliography of Cynthia Ozick because it's not nearly as impressive as the other thinkers that we had, where we had pages and pages of papers, articles, and books. So she has half a dozen, maybe 10 short stories and novels, and she has about half a dozen essays. She was a great essayist, and I think, two or three of her collections of essays. They were very worth reading. So that's my introduction to her. So I'm going to share my screen. Uh, Hopefully. Let's try this. Okay, good. Okay. I'm pretty confident that sharing, I'm going to pick on the same person as I do every week. Meira, I can see you. Thumbs up. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay. So I always find it remarkable that I spend so much time getting excited for preparing a course for a 6 week course, and it's the final week. So I don't know if Rabbi Kelman is coming on at all. I didn't speak to him today, but I'd like to thank Rabbi Kelman for inviting me to teach this course and on the Torah in Motion platform. It's been lots of fun. But this week, Cynthia Ozick, the fifth of our uh, great thinkers. So she's 97 now. Um, she was born in 1928. And as far as I'm aware, she'd lived her whole life in New York. Couldn't see anything to contradict that. Born and raised by Jewish immigrants, attended Hunter College and NYU. And I've just put a little thing there. Her works explore Jewish identity, the Holocaust. I'm really interested in her and we're going to see it particularly in the pagan rabbi, this interplay between sacred and profane, which is an interesting subject within the Jewish milieu of rabbinic literature, and she really goes to town on that, and um, and her exploration of Jewish American experiences. So I've got a nice piece on her life here. I think I didn't check where I got this from. I think I originally got this. It might be Wikipedia, but no, I don't think it's Wikipedia. I think this is from the JWA, Jewish Women's Association. I think that's what it is. Ozick studied at a boys' cheder. I was thinking of
Jewish
Yentl.
Women's Archive.
Sorry?
Jewish Women's Archive.
Jewish Women's Archive. Sorry, yes, you're quite right. Thank you. I just say things slightly wrong to make sure that people are listening and correct me. So thank you. She studied at the Boys' Cheder, gaining an early love of Yiddish and of Jewish culture that would infuse her work. She went to Hunter College, NYU, and Ohio State University. So presumably that was a period she wasn't in New York, discovering a passion for Western literature, particularly Henry James, whose writing would deeply influence her own. So the influence of James is huge, and she really immerses herself in James, and as it says here, a very big influence on her. Her first published novel, Trust, appeared in 1966. She was born in 28, so she's 38 already, followed by five more novels, 14 collections of short stories and essays, two plays, one of which was an adaptation of her widely acclaimed story of the Holocaust, The Shawl, which we're going to go into some depth about. And I apologize in advance. Both the shawl and the pagan rabbi have triggering aspects. So the shawl is a very, very hard read. You'll see there's a link to it on my handout. You can read the whole short story. It was published on the New York Times website, and it's still available. And if anyone can't get hold of the Pagan Rabbi, I have a PDF of it, which I'm happy to share. So, over the course of her career, she won many of the highest honors in the field for powerful and challenging prose, three O. Henry Prizes, fellowships from Guggenheim, the National Endowment for Arts, two Penn Awards, and a National Book Critics Circle Award. So, for sure, she's a hugely accomplished writer, and her stories, short stories, essays, and everything that she's written has been very, very influential. So I've got another piece about her, which I found really interesting. Um, and this is by somebody called Daniel Walden. When Cynthia Ozick was in graduate school at Ohio State University, she was besotted with the religion of literature. I love that phrase, the religion of literature. As she admitted once, she actually became Henry James for a while, though I was a nearsighted 22-year-old young woman infected with the commonplace intention of writing a novel. Right, so she is a dreamer in her early years, and she discovered Leo Beck's essay on romantic religion. She began that process of synthesis and non-synthesis. of Judaizing herself and her material within a Christian civilization's context that we have come to recognize as hers. So here we see, or we're just being introduced to the challenges for her. There's being a Jew in the Christian world, there's being a woman in a man's world in general, but also as a writer. And all of these tensions, certainly the pagan rabbi is really, I think, the story par excellence of these tensions, but we're going to see how she wrote about these things. Perhaps, as I've described Chaim Potok in an earlier essay, she is Zwischenmensch, a between person, one who is an autodidact, who seems to have read almost everything of the world's literature, as well as Jewish history and religion, but she's caught up in the conflict between her traditionalism and the echoing world she also longs to embrace. And that last line will really be we will be very mindful about when we explore the pagan rabbi. Apart from anything, it's a great title. But so she is between many worlds, and she brings this out, and it's certainly I'm not an expert, although I have taught a course here in the UK on American Jewish history. I suppose from the 1950s onwards, maybe even a bit earlier, this Jews moving out into the suburbs and the rise of conservative movement and being part of the world but separate from the world. These have been really real struggles, certainly American Jewish experience, but the same here in the UK and I'm sure all over the diaspora. So Cynthia Ozick is an important person for us to think about as we are now living in the diaspora. So this is uh, this is a nice piece from My Jewish Learning. They always surprise me. I don't know if anyone here looks at My Jewish Learning, but every now and then when I'm researching somebody or something, I look at their entry and I find something useful. And we're going to come back to Cynthia Ozick's view of being a Jewish writer and being a woman writer a bit later on. But it says here the term Jewish writer ought to be an oxymoron, observed Cynthia Ozick, in her typically sharp essay tradition and or versus the Jewish writer from her collection The Din in the Head. Ozick is specifically referring to novelists like Norma Mailer, whose best work she believes stems from a rejection of the bonds of tradition, be it literary or religious. Now, there is quite a famous debate that she had with Norma Mailer. I can't remember when it was, and this diminutive woman comes up on the stage to debate him, and she basically says that she's going to wipe the floor with him, and she does that in the debate. I think it's on YouTube, but I actually haven't watched it. But there are lots of references to it if you read articles about Ozick. But she is not afraid of binding herself to the literary and the religious. Tradition is the air Ozick breathes, informing nearly all of her work. Her novella Envy, or Yiddish in America, envisions the writers of her generation, Philip Roth, Bernard Malamud, Saul Bellow, through the eyes of a frustrated Yiddish writer of an earlier time named Edelstein, infuriated by what he sees as a race away from the Jewish heritage and their desire to conform. Jewish novelists, savages, the all-rightniks' children, all they know is to curse the all-rightnik. They're Yiddish, one word here, one word there, shiksa on one page, putz on the other, and that's the whole vocabulary. So here we have a social critique that takes the form of a literary one. So it's fascinating to have a writer who not only all of her writing is so clearly associated with her traditional background, but is not afraid to critique her Jewish colleagues for running away from their tradition, which is nice and refreshing. And today, of course, I mean, today in 2025, Jewish writers and artists are scared of being overtly Jewish. Many of them are being cancelled. Um, we've had here in the UK, I'm sure it's the same in the US. We've had Israeli bands who don't live in Israel, or Israeli artists, actors, Gadot. They're all being cancelled left, right, and centre. And Ozik is proud and loud about her tradition. Okay, so we're going to spend a few slides, and I think this is really central to us understanding Cynthia Ozick, and that is to look at her views on feminism, Judaism, and God. And this is a really lovely, I've got a couple of slides from this interview in 1986. And I think, if I'm not wrong, I put right at the end, I put one more piece from this interview. I'm just checking. Maybe I didn't, but I took out the best bits of the interview. Um, so, ooh, okay. Cynthia Ozick. Well, the great intellectual and philosophical heritage of the Jews is truly the work of half the Jewish people, namely the men. I mean, in this course, I've taught five thinkers and only one woman, so that's 20%. I think women, in being deprived of this, have been buffeted. They have been given a sense of being outsiders to their own tradition. There's a sense, if you haven't created it, of course it's yours and you have been given it. But at the same time, if you have the intellect, you have the love for the Jewish people, you have all the other concerns and insights, you want also to be among the creators who make the tradition and its evolution. So she's crying out here. She's saying, we are all part of this tradition, men and women equally, but women don't have the voice and they wanted it. So her interviewer says, is it true that when you were a child just starting in Hebrew school, that on the first day the rabbi dismissed you and said, girls were not supposed to learn, take her home? She's in this cheder, and she says, that's exactly what he said. It's shocking. And unfortunately, there is some source material in the Orthodox rabbinic literature that will support him, but you don't say it. It's not true. But she said, my grandmother had taken me by the hand to Cheder or Hebrew school, obeyed him, and took me home. And I don't know what happened in her mind or in the mind of the household overnight, but I do recall the next day I was back there to stay. So her earliest memories of being creative and being involved in the Jewish, educational learning world was an extremely negative one. Okay, so she's asked, I wonder what the rabbi would think if he knew that you were Phi Beta Kappa and have been honored by the Guggenheim Fellowship, by the National Endowment for the Arts, by the Academy of Arts and Letters, and won 3 prizes for your short stories. What do you think he would think? And I love that question. And I like her answer even, well, I mean, it's sad in some ways, but I think it's easy for me to imagine what he would think. He would regard it as chaff and wind. He would regard it as part of the secular world, which has no weight or meaning. It would not be part of his religious and metaphysical civilization. He would regard it as insignificant and without worth. Uh, she's obviously expressing something. I don't want to say she's bitter, but I think she's not incorrect. But the rabbi would clearly be incorrect. Um, some of the greatest rabbis of the last 100 years have been incredible in terms of their attachment to literature. If we just take, Cynthia Ozick's her field, then Rabbi Dr. Aaron Lichtenstein, Rosh Yeshiva of Gush, was a PhD in English literature. So, this one rabbi leaves an impression on her for her whole life. This is 1986. And it's a negative impression of the Orthodox Jewish, I'll put it in quotes, approach to literature. But she recognized that in certain parts of the Orthodox world, that all of her achievements would be for naught. I don't think she really cares. She's just stating a fact. The two worlds couldn't be further apart. and that's really important when we get to the pagan rabbi. We'll see how she creates a caricature of these two separate worlds. She says, well, I don't know how to answer exactly. I think it's something she must work out for herself. Didn't put the question here, but in our synagogue, where we have a very beautiful souled rabbi, there will not, and it is an Orthodox synagogue, there will not be a change within anybody's foreseeable lifetime, right? But I do believe in the long run there will be. I think this was I can't remember. It was about women's involvement. I'm sorry, I left the question out there. Um, and I think a day will come, whether it will be my daughter or her daughter, remains to be seen, a day will come when there will be justice for women. So it could well be. I can't remember off the top of my head. Just talking about equality for women, which sits nicely with what she was just talking about. And in many ways, there will. She's right. There will be, and we're already seeing it today. There'll be, women are learning and teaching. Certainly in the same way that men are within certain parts of the modern Orthodox Jewish world. Women will have leadership roles as rabbis or rabbah or yoetzet halachot. It may take longer for that to become mainstream, but certain parts of the modern Orthodox world, that is the case. But there are some things I think that will never change. And one of those, for example, is women being witnesses in a court case, in a bet din, in a Jewish court. It won't happen, and it can't happen according to Orthodox Judaism. There are exceptions that the Talmud talks about, so it depends how far she wants it to go. And I'm not being critical of her at all. We are getting there, but and she's right. It's an interesting sociological question about whether, change will have to happen very, very slowly, which it certainly does in the traditional world. But occasionally it needs a revolution as opposed to evolution. And maybe, some things that a small group have to make radical changes, but it still would take time within the Orthodox milieu. But she's very interested with what happens within Orthodoxy. Um, and her interview says you've written quite powerfully about the theological basis for your understanding of yourself as a woman. You said the Creator has no likeness in any terms that human beings can see or know or imagine. Right? So uh, he's saying to her that your understanding of God is the God of Maimonides, right? They're non-physical. When we talked about being created in the image of God, it doesn't mean our physical being. It might be our intellect or speech or whatever it is. And she says, yes, she agrees. So he asks her, what is the essence of God? And this is a really fascinating answer that she gives. Um, as a Jew, it's not for me to say that. And this is really deep. She's not a philosopher. I mean, she's very bright and she's written many, many essays. I don't want to downplay her, but she says for me to say that, I think would border on idolatry and would be a non-Jewish statement. We have all these mystical traditions and books that talk about, the limbs of God and she's right because critiques of that mode of thinking will say that is broad. Maybe it is idolatry, or for Maimonides it would be. So she's touching on something very profound here. Deuteronomy gives it to us. I believe it's Deuteronomy 29:29. The gist of what that is, you go about your business, you humankind, and leave the mystery to me. Capital M-E, me. That's the voice of the Creator. And I've been working for the last 4 years on my doctoral dissertation, and I've very much been thinking and writing about the fact that, we can't know God really. There's a big gap between the infinite God, not knowable here on earth, and um, and God. And classically, when Moses asked God if he can see, he wants to see God. God says, "No, no person can see my face and live." So there's this gap between our ability to perceive and even know God that she's picking up on. And so it seems to me our human business is not like the Gnostics, which means the knowers who believe they could envisage and even seize the nature of God. But Deuteronomy 29:29 is that it's very hard agnostic. It says one cannot know the nature of God. And to posit the nature of God is to posit a human image. And once you've done that, you're already made an idol. And so it seems to me that the essence, as you put it, is by definition unknowable, or you cannot be a monotheist. And I think this is brilliant philosophy of religion, theology, and she's saying something, really profound here. It could be that, she's using it. I don't get the sense she is, but she's using it from a feminist standpoint to say, man is not the image of God, woman is not the image of God. There's total equality between men and women. But I feel like she's really touching on something deeply, deeply profound. Okay. So I alluded to this. This was an interview in 1997. And she was asked, some have called you a Jewish writer, a woman writer, a Jewish woman writer, a fiction writer, a poet, and an essayist. What do you call yourself? If you remember in the very first year, the question I had was, what's a Jewish thinker? And I put Jewish in inverted commas, and then I put thinker in inverted commas, and both phrases in inverted commas. So this is a similar question. And she says, I'm a fiction writer, and I do write essays, but I'm not a poet. That's good. That's very clear. And I absolutely reject the phrase woman writer as anti-feminist. I wrote an essay about this as far back as 1977 at the height of the neo-feminist movement. It was becoming apparent then that there were going to be two categories of writers, writers and women writers. And in fact, this has nearly come about. People often ask how I can reject the phrase woman writer and not reject the phrase Jewish writer. A preposterous question. Jewish is a category of civilization, culture, and intellect. So here we have a really nice definition by Ozick of what it means to be Jewish, civilization, culture, and intellect. And woman is a category of anatomy and physiology. It's rough thinking to confuse vast cultural and intellectual movements with the capacity to bear children. It's a lovely, lovely line. So she is a Jewish writer. She's not a Jewish woman writer, and she's not a woman writer. But she's clearly deeply, deeply attached to her Jewish roots, and she's extremely forthright in her opinions on feminism. I mean, nothing here I'm presenting is radical. It makes perfect sense. Okay, I'm going to take a breath. So what I'm going to do for most of the rest of this class is look at the two stories that I've referred to, and then I've got a couple of concluding remarks. I as I said, if you I'm happy to put it in the chat at the end if anyone wants me to. I will put the link from the New Yorker, and I can put the PDF for the Pagan Rabbi. If anyone shows interest in the chat, then I'll do that at the end. Okay, so we're going to start with the Pagan Rabbi. No, sorry, we're going to start with the Shul. I have to say, I reread this a couple of days ago, and it's a very, very hard read. It's a terrible story set in the concentration camp. If anyone, I've been very privileged in my lifetime to go to Poland twice. Once as I was 17 years old in high school, and I went again as a madrich with my old school. So I've spent a couple of weeks in Poland, visited many camps and cities. And after my first trip was in 1990, if you're quick at your maths, you can work out roughly how old I am. I read everything I could possibly get my hands on to do with the Holocaust. And then I burnt out and I stopped reading everything. I haven't really read much Holocaust literature. I don't like watching Holocaust. I mean, none of us like watching Holocaust films, but So I reread The Shawl this week, and it was a brutal read for me. I found it very hard hitting. So it's a short story. The link there. I think you hopefully you've been emailed the my handouts, so you've got the link in my handout. First published in 1980 in the New Yorker. It tells the story of three characters, Rosa, Magda, and Stella, on the march to and internment in a Nazi concentration camp. The shawl is noted for its ability to instill in the reader the horror of the Holocaust in less than 2,000 words. It is such a tight piece of writing. It's a remarkable story. Um, it takes 10 minutes to read. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it took, I think, 10 minutes to read. Um, and it's interesting. It's tragic because she was inspired to write the story because she had read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer, which is quite a remarkable book. I read it many years ago. Um, so she reads this true account of something that happened in the camp, and then she fictionalizes it and she writes this short story. So this is a summary of the story, and I apologize to anyone. I hope people are not too upset by it, but it's important to get a gist of the story. The story follows Rosa, her baby Magda, and her niece Stella on their march to a Nazi concentration camp in the middle of winter. They're described as weak and starving during the march. The language, I mean, I really do recommend reading it. It's one of the most beautiful and haunting pieces of writing. Stella's knees are described as tumors on sticks. Rosa is said to be a walking cradle because she constantly carries Magda close to her chest, wrapped in her shawl. Rosa contemplates handing Magda off to one of the villagers watching their march, but decides that the guards would most likely just shoot them both. Rosa says the shawl is magic when Magda sucks on it because it sustained Magda for 3 days and 3 nights without food. It's a very powerful imagery of the baby at her mother's breast and the breast not producing milk and the moisture in the shawl sustaining her. Stella observes that Magda looks Aryan, but Rosa sees the observation as some kind of threat to Magda. At the camp, Rosa continues to hide Magda, but is in constant fear that someone will discover and kill her. One day, Stella takes Magda's shawl away to warm herself. Without her shawl, Magda, who hadn't made a sound since the march, begins screaming for her ma. Rosa hears the screaming but does not run to Magda because the guards will kill them both. Instead, she runs to get the shawl and begins waving it in the hope that Magda will see it and calm down. She's too late and watches as the Nazi guards pick Magda up and throw her into the electric fence, killing her. Rosa stuffs the shawl into her mouth to stop herself from screaming. It's the most brutal story, even more brutal because it's based on a true story. The imagery throughout is haunting, and I don't know how she wrote it, if it was a stream of consciousness but somehow Ozick really encapsulates the horror of the Holocaust in this short story. Um, what's what's really interesting before we go on, and that's all I want to say about it. I think one of the most moving and brilliant pieces of literature that I've ever read. Its brevity and haunting nature and imagery. I'm not. The last time I studied English was at A level between the ages of 16 and 18, so I don't consider it to be my field in any way, but it's just remarkable. One really interesting sort of addendum to the story is that she she wrote a longer novel of the story, where the story continues post-war um, in America. I have to confess I haven't read it, but I was finishing reading the pagan rabbi today, and there is a reference to surviving, a baby surviving this being thrown at a fence, and the pagan rabbi set in America later. Um, so it's obviously something that goes through her writing, and it's something that really haunts her. So we'll put a line through uh, grim Holocaust story, and we'll take another breath, and we'll think about the pagan rabbi. The pagan rabbi is a longer story, um, and I'll give you a summary and some of the thoughts about the story in a minute. I'll just say the story, that the trigger warning is the story is centered around the death by suicide of not the main protagonist, but one of the characters in the story, Rabbi Kornfeld. Um, but whilst that's a terrible, thing to write about, the suicide is really, well, the cause of the suicide is very important to the story, but it's just, the beginning of the story. We're told that this rabbi died by suicide, and then we're introduced to what might have caused it, what might have led this Orthodox rabbi to he hangs himself under a tree, which is very important. Um, and an old friend of his wants to find out, why this happened. So let's look at the pagan rabbi. Ozik's overt preoccupation is the nature of the modern world and the quality of Jewish life in America. So this is her commentary. This is her question. Underlying this is the problem of being a writer, read pagan, and a Jew, the best possible Jew one can be. And what does that mean? As is clearly illustrated in the pagan rabbi, Ozik sees the world divided into two. That is, with opposing forces pulling at each other, pulling at each individual. Whether she terms it nature versus history, paganism versus Judaism, Pan versus Moses, or magic versus religion, and all of these couplets come together in the story. She's talking about the same thing. The pull on the one hand of the easy life, and the pull on the other of order, sense, and clarification. The easy life is nature and magic, admiring the sunset, running barefoot in a meadow, falling in love with the mystery of the sea. The life of clarification demands attention to history, and for the Jew, observance of the mitzvot. This is a life not given, but made, not with ease, but with difficulty, right? It's hard to be a Jew. We've got all these rules and all this tradition, but to be free, whether we call it a pagan, nature, Pan, and in the story, the rabbi, the pagan rabbi, he starts out as this sort of learned rabbi who has a position where he teaches Mishnah and rabbinic literature. And as the story goes on, he has this thirst for knowledge and reads more and more books. And the books become more eclectic. And the last, it's about, I don't know what it is, 17-page story. It's 30 odd pages. I printed 2 pages to a page, so it's 34, 35 pages. He the rabbi describes the difference between the free soul is found in nature and animals and everything not Jewish, and the bound soul in humanity, but probably more specifically in the Jew. And he's seeking the free soul, and he ends up, having these, going out and hugging a tree, and seeing nymphs and having a conversation with nymphs and falling in love. It's a very bizarre, almost fantastical story, but used to really highlight the what appears to be unbridgeable gap between the Jew and the writer or the pagan. And this is the uh, tension that Ozick brings out in the story. So I think I've got two slides with that. I would love to go through the whole story with you and pick it apart. That would be a lovely thing to do. But I've got two short excerpts from the story. This is right at the beginning. We had been classmates in the rabbinical seminary. Our fathers were both rabbis. They were also friends, but only in a loose way of speaking. In actuality, our fathers were enemies. They vied with one another in demonstrations of charitableness, in the captious glitter of their scholia and the number of their adherents. Of the two, Isaac's father was the milder. I was afraid of my father. He had a certain disease of the larynx, and if he even uttered something so trivial as bring the tea to my mother, it came out splintered, clamorous, and vindictive. Neither man was philosophical in the slightest. It was the one thing they agreed on. Philosophy is an abomination. Isaac's father used to say, I'm a philosopher, so I'm a bit worried about that. The Greeks were philosophers, but they remained children playing with their dolls. Even Socrates, a monotheist, nevertheless sent money down to the temple to pay for incense to their doll. Idolatry is the abomination, Isaac argued, not philosophy. The latter is the corridor to the former, his father said. So here we have the friend of the rabbi who dies by suicide talking about their parents and their background. And their background is one of philosophy is bad, idolatry is terrible. And his friend who dies because he goes after idolatry, maybe philosophy, but certainly idolatry, the tree and these nymphs. Um, this is just really the beginning before the story gets going, but it sets the scene that their fathers, had these very strong ideas. The next generation down, the danger is there. Some huge and terrifying volume, heavy as a stone, I peered forward in the moonlight, a tractate of the Mishnah. Its leaves are so worn they break as he turns them, but he does not turn them often, because there is much matter on a single page. He is so sad. Such antique weariness broods in his face. His throat is stripped from the whip. His cheeks are folded like ancient flags. He reads the law and breathes the dust. And are there flowers on either side of the road? Incredible flowers of every colour. And noble shrubs like mounds of green moss and the cricket crackling in the field. He passes indifferent through the beauty of the field. His nostrils sniff his book as if flowers lay on the clotted page, but the flowers lick his feet. His feet are bandaged, his notched toenails gore the path, his prayer shawl droops on his studious back. He reads the law and breathes the dust, and doesn't see the flowers and won't heed the critic spitting in the field. That, said the dryad, is your soul, and was gone with all her odours. It's so full of incredible imagery. Religion is dead or dying and dusty, and the power of nature. There is a little bit, not a huge amount, of erotic nature of the relationship. The flowers lick his feet when he goes to the tree where he eventually hangs himself. He hugs the tree. He has these sensory experiences with the tree, and this is the challenge for the Jew in the modern world. The colorful, the great smells and the lure of everything else. Or we can turn to our dusty Mishnah. And it's a very tragic story and a tragic view of Orthodoxy Judaism in the modern era, probably centered around American Orthodox Judaism. Um, and in many ways, I think we've moved, excuse me, we've moved past this in many ways. I think there's been much success in the modern Orthodox world, and there's much work to do. But she brings out this incredible tension between the outside world and Orthodox Judaism. So I'm just going to conclude with I'm not sure you're allowed to do what I did, but I have conclusion one and conclusion two. I have two slides to share with you with some concluding remarks about Cynthia Ozick, and then I'll have some time to take some questions. So, firstly, Cynthia Ozick is a Jewish writer going back to this, but I think this is a lovely piece. What can we say about Ozick as a Jewish writer? Her strength as a Jewish essayist is neither the consistency nor logic of her often polemical essays, but her passionate groping, her wholehearted grappling with Judaism, now trying to make it consistent with feminism, now trying to convince assimilated or nominal Jews of the continuing truths and ethical power of Judaism. She was clearly, or she is clearly, deeply attached to traditional Judaism, and it comes through all of her writing. And at their best, her brilliant, inventive stories and novels are deeply informed by Judaism and suggest that American Jewish fiction can not only explore the lives of Jews, probe what it means to live as a Jew in America, but also explore Judaism itself, its ideas and law, its history and moral vision. In this, she demonstrates both the continuing vitality of American Jewish literature and maps out possibilities for new directions as well. Perhaps consistency and logical rigor are irrelevant to artistic creation, and we are ungrateful to complain that as a thinker, this tempestuous and iconoclastic writer does not provide us, or has not yet provided us, with a guide to the perplexed. Right? She's passionate and she writes, over many, many decades, many different essays and stories, and we should just really bask in the glory that is Cynthia Ozick. It really does amaze me. Most of my friends have never read anything written by Cynthia Ozick. The people that I would say are those friends who are better read, who've read lots of literature, lots of essays, haven't read Cynthia Ozick. So I'm hoping that this class will inspire people, at the very least, to read the two stories that I've shared with you, but to try and engage with some of her thinking. So the New York Times in 2016 wrote, and I think this is really important, both from the pagan rabbi, but more generally with her whole view of Judaism, American Judaism, we see how deeply Ozick's being is suffused with Jewish thought. For Jewishness, her work also insists, depends upon the principle of Havdalah, or distinction making, Jew and Gentile, God and man, or to recall the terms of her amiable discussion with Bloom. Oh, yes, I said it was with someone else, it was with Bloom. God and idol. These are categories that should not be muddled. The same goes for literature and for the judgment of literature. According to Ozick, literature is different from all other human activities, and its singularity consists in its recognizing and honoring human difference. Its purpose, she has said, is to light up the least grain of being, to show how it is concretely individual, particularized from any other. And I find this really, really interesting because all of our thinkers that we've had on this course were great liberal thinkers, humanists, universalists. And yet what we have with Ozick is really a particularist. I'm Jewish, and I'm going to talk about my Judaism, and I'm going to talk about how my particular faith, community, tradition, history, civilization, culture is different from. I might talk about the struggles between what I live or my tradition and the outside world, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we are a particular group with a particular history, culture, civilization, literature. And she wants to use her literature not only to be extremely proud of her Jewish heritage, but to highlight the challenges and the differences between the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world, between the pagan and the Jew and Pan, and that's really all I have to say about Cynthia Ozick. Really, if you read anything as a result of this course, I would say She is, I mean, they're all worth reading, but she is absolutely wonderful. So I'm just going to have a look at the chat. And while I do that, if anyone's got any other questions they want to ask me, then please feel free. Let me just have a look at the chat. There are a couple of questions. Just put this over here. Uh-huh. Okay, I will post the. Oh, okay. So this is I'm not sure where the Mishnah says that, Larry. The Mishnah states the one who is walking and studying Torah and stops to admire a tree deserves to die. Is it because he admired the tree or because he did not acknowledge the creator of the tree? If I, maybe it's in Avodah Zarah, I can't remember. Okay.
Avot.
Oh, it's in
Haya
Avot.
metalech baderech
Yes.
domer mana ilan zeh.
I said Avodah Zarah, and then my second guess would have been Avot. But okay. Um. So it could be any number of reasons. I think in that context, it's probably bittul Torah, right? It's stopping learning Torah because it's particularly in the context that you're walking and studying, and then you stop to admire a tree. So that's bittul Torah. That's annulling or wasting your time doing that. I'd have to look at the Mishnah. Of course, in general, there's nothing wrong with looking at a tree and admiring it. Ma Rabbi Ma'asech Hashem, right? How wondrous are your creations, Hashem. And Avram Avinu, Abraham looked at nature, and that was how he came to understand that there was only one true God. So I don't think the tree is a problem. I'm not sure. I'd have to look again. I don't think it's Dafka, particularly that he admired the tree. And I don't think that it's because he didn't acknowledge the creator. That would slip into, idolatry. I think it's much more to do with the fact that he stopped studying Torah at that moment. I, I, I mean, tangentially, I was only retelling a story a few weeks ago that many years ago I was learning in synagogue early in the morning before Shacharit, before the morning prayers, and the earlier service didn't have a minyan, right? They weren't quorate, and they came and asked my study partner and me if we could go and help make a minyan. And I said, it's not so straightforward because I'm learning. And I'm not sure I can stop learning to go and to pray now. Answers on a postcard if you think what you think. I did the human thing, and that was went to help make a minyan, right? But I'm not sure it was halachically the correct thing to do. But yeah, stopping learning to look at a tree for the Mishnah is a problem. But in the story, the pagan rabbi, the tree is like symbolic of the pagan rabbi. Rabbi Kornfeld is obsessed with nature, with free souls, with these spirits that fly around, and he falls in love with the spirits, and he has conversation with spirits. It's drawing him away from Yadut, from Orthodoxy. It's an amazing story. It's a really an amazing story. I think if you start it, you won't. You, you you'd be surprised where it ends up. But okay, I'm just going to try and share in the chat.
I would like to ask you a question, if I may.
Oh, of course.
Would you say that Middlemarch's author, George Eliot, who studied Talmud at the end of her life, is a character that Cynthia Ozick esteemed as an anti-pagan because of this?
That's a great question, and I'm just going to say way above my pay grade. I can't answer. I don't know. Or in a more rabbinic parlance, I would say tzarich iyun. I don't know. I'd have to look at that a bit more to answer that. But it's a good question. I haven't read Middlemarch for a very, very long time, so I don't know.
Daniel Deronda, of course, is an
Yes,
most
yes,
important
yes.
Jewish novel, but she basically was very interested in Judaism not only in Judaism, but in Talmud, as it turns out. And she had
Yeah.
a close relationship with a rabbi.
Yeah, absolutely. Just while I'm talking, I can't share the PDF of the pagan rabbi because I'm limited what I can do with the chat. So what I'm doing now is I put the link to the shawl in the chat, so you can all open that and save it and read it. Well worth it. And I will, when I finish teaching this class, I will email the office at Torah Motion and I'll send the PDF and I'll ask them to send it to everyone of the pagan rabbi. And if anyone has any questions on either story, I'm very happy to answer. If you email the office, they won't let you email me directly, but they'll pass on your email and I'll happily respond.
I just like to tell you, I'd like to send you my poems of the George, inspired by George Eliot. Can you give me your email address? I'll send them.
If you email the office, if you email Torah in Motion, they with any links or documents, they will send it to me, and then I'll email you back privately and say a große shkoyach. I'll say thank you.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Much less fiery today. Not a mention of Zionism or anti-Zionism. It's very good for everyone's health and good spirits. So I'm happy to stay on for a couple of minutes, but if no one's got any questions, we'll draw to a close. Have a wonderful summer, everyone. Thank you all for coming to the series. I'm hoping that at some point I'll run other series with Torah in Motion, but I'm also hoping to run maybe one more series on other thinkers, because we have a good probably another 5 or 6 that I'd like to cover in another series.
I think people might have to be subscribers to the New Yorker to print that article. I am a subscriber, so I could do it. And maybe when you make the PDF available for the other one, you could make PDF available for the shawl as well in case anybody has a problem.
So the shawl is open access, I think, but the PDF, I just Googled the Pagan Rabbi Ozick free PDF. It
I guess
came up.
it to be available.
WhatsApp audio.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful. Sorry, what'd you say, Dan? Oh, he's gone. Okay.
Oh, Jeff,
Okay.
thank you. תודה רבה, I say.
Bavakasha.
Thank you. Come
Thank
back again. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, kulam. Thank you very much.
Is there any relationship between Ozek's story, The Shawl, and Agnon's story, Hamid Pachat? I read Hamid Pachat years and years ago, so I don't remember it too well.
Yeah, I don't think I have ever read it, and I don't know is the answer. So what I want you to do is read the shawl and reread the Agnon, and then email me and tell me your answer. This is a good PhD project for you, I think. Meira, I can see you've gone off mute and you're waiting to say something to me.
I would to ask if you do a next one, which I hope you do, would you do Hadoeg?
Do who?
Aleph Dalet Gordon?
Could be. Listen, I'm not out to self-promote, but if you want another course, tell Rabbi Kelman, and you can suggest as many names as you like, and I will consider who I think will be the best material. So I'm really open to suggestions for people to cover. Either I've already taught some of them and that will be easier, and others, thank you, Meira, I would have to do a lot of prep for, but that's okay. That's why I'm here.
Thank you for the class. It was very interesting and new.
It was my pleasure and honor. Okay, I'm going to go, everyone. Say good night. Shabbat shalom. Please, God, see you again in the future.